and this is devastating for the public. The Sydney Morning Herald's survey last year showed that 81% of the public...
Tim Costello there, but certainly a coalition of characters lining up against the repeal of this legislation. Dan Tehan said that this... Tim Costello just said that this is all about vested interests and them really being in control, and the state's really being beholden to the revenue that comes out of pokie machines.
Well, I don't see that as correct. I mean, I come from Victoria. The Victorian state government have put in place good laws here, and what I think we need to do is see whether we can get the rest of the states to roll that out. But we shouldn't have the federal government intervening, putting more regulation in place. What we need to see is each state government understanding that we need to tackle this issue and putting the laws in place to do that.
Why not have the federal government intervene here? Because essentially what is being proposed on the other side is just to have more self-regulation from the industry. Isn't that just putting the fox in charge of the hen house?
Well, not really. I mean, it's been proven that the regulation doesn't work. No one's quite sure how to do it, how to go about it. The states are trying to deal with it. Why should the Commonwealth come in and intervene and put another layer of regulation? Let's the states work this out. That's where the responsibility lies in this area, and that's where I think we need to go, and we need to be saying to each state government, you need to take what action you see necessary in this area.
This is a contentious issue in the last Parliament, Stephen Jones. Some of your colleagues just simply don't want to have a fight with the industry. What would you say to them?
Yeah, look, a couple of things I want to say. Firstly, Andrew Wilkie does himself no favours by suggesting people are on the take, and that's his language, pretty offensive. I can say exactly how much money I've taken from the industry, zero. I come to this with an understanding about what the public interest needs. Now, last year, Tony Abbott said he supported voluntary pre-commitment. The bill that they are trying to overturn does nothing more than facilitate voluntary pre-commitment. And if you want a uniform approach, you've got to do it from the National Parliament. Otherwise, you have a ridiculous situation where you can drive 10 kilometres across the Queensland border, have one system in place in Queensland, another system in place in New South Wales. It won't work. The federal parliament is the best place to deal with it, and it should.
Okay, let's move on to the issue of Holden that has been bubbling away for some days now. We now look at reports in the United States that these reports are coming from GM, from unnamed sources once again, but it does look inevitable. But Dan Tehan, it's fair to say that there is a philosophical difference and debate going on in the coalition at the moment. Do you see Holden shutting up as inevitable, and are you one of those who doesn't want to see any more money thrown at Holden?
Well, it does seem, sadly, that Holden is now on life support, and what we need to hear from General Motors is what are their plans, because they need to make a clear statement of what they've got in mind for the car-making industry here in Australia, because if they keep going like they are, we're all going to be in the dark about this. The federal government has stepped in and is trying to help the car industry here. We're trying to get rid of the carbon tax. We got rid of the $1.8 billion fringe benefit tax hit that the previous Labor government wanted to put on. We want to see it survive.
Sure, but you're also pulling $500 million a year out of the automotive transformation scheme. Wouldn't that help?
Well, we can't go on subsidising the industry continually. In the end, it's got to learn to stand on its own 2 feet. Every other industry in Australia, or other industries in Australia, have to do that, and the car industry should be the same. We've said to them, this is the consistent policy approach we're going to take. You can rely on that. We're not like the previous Labor government, which put in place schemes and then took them away. We've said this is the approach that we will take. Now it's up to General Motors in the US to make a decision. OK, what are their long-term plans for the car industry here in Australia?
Okay, Stephen Jones, Labor's argument throughout the last few days has been there's not a car in the world that's not subsidised in some way by government. Using Germany as an example, though, they have the export market, the volume. The difference is it's more difficult particularly in those two aspects for Australia, and it's not quite sustainable. If you speak to guys like John Camillo and some of the workers there, they accept that it's difficult for Australia to really ramp up production when you're looking at the export market. So what's the answer?
Sure. Look, Labor in government said we were willing to support and did support the car industry, but the car industry in return has got to make cars that people want to buy both here and overseas. We can't survive on a domestic market alone. We need to have an export market. We all agree on that. I agree with Ian Macfarlane when he says he wants the government to support a domestic car industry. I just hope the rest of his caucus colleagues agree with him as well. We know that there is a big blue going on inside the coalition at the moment. We know that this is effectively a get square for the GrainCorp decision because they blew their economic credibility. They spent all their coin by bailing out GrainCorp for the Nationals.
On Holden though, is it too
and they're
late?
trying to muscle
Is it too late? Looking at the reports coming out of the United States today, this government's only been in power for 3 months. Surely Holden's been talking about this, or GM's been talking about this for some time.
Yeah, look, there is no doubt that Holden, like every other international car maker, is looking at its global platforms and where it does its work.
But it's
is
not
there
only
any wonder?
They're not only shutting down in Australia, it's also their South Korea production, also Germany. So this is not just isolated to Australia. Would you agree?
Look, what I understand, and I take Ian McFarlane at his word on this, is that Holden haven't made a decision yet. They need to get a clear indication from the government that they are willing to talk and they're willing to come to the table. They're getting a lot of mixed messages at the moment.
Dan Tehan, what about the South Australian election coming up? This is not good timing.
No, but we can't be held to ransom on these decisions by the electoral cycle. What we have to do is what's in the nation's industry, and we've told the car industry very plainly what we will provide in assistance to them, and we made it clear before the election. So it's now beholden on us to say to General Motors, OK, it's your time to make a decision. It's your time to decide what are your plans for the industry here, and we really need General Motors to come out and make a clear statement about their plans.
That's not quite true. It's not quite true. You're hanging everything on the Productivity Commission report coming down in a fortnight's time. So the existing $370 million that's available to the car industry, another $50 million that's available to the component sector, that's all up for grabs if the Productivity Commission report doesn't find in their favour, and they haven't been big supporters of car industry support in the past.
Well, that's not what we're hearing out of the US at the moment. What we're hearing out of the US at the moment is that General Motors have made their decisions and they're not waiting for what we're doing here in Australia. Now, if that is the case, then they need to make that very clear.
All right, I quickly want to move on to Qantas. This has been also another dual issue. Dan Tehan, should the government inject equity into Qantas? Is that something that you are philosophically opposed to, or should it be on the table, at least as a negotiation?
Well, I don't think it would be a sensible course of action to take. I think the better thing that we could do is look at the Qantas Sale Act. Obviously, we have Virgin competing here in the Australian market. It has overseas investors in its operations. I think that that's the part of the operation we need to look at when it comes to Qantas. I think we need to have the debate around the Sale Act. We need to see whether there are potentially foreign airlines that might like to invest in Qantas, and I think that's the best way to go. We just can't keep providing money to industries because, as we've seen, we're potentially going to have $430 billion in gross debt. That will be the peak. At some stage, we've got to start saying to all industries, it's time to start standing on your own 2 feet.
Stephen Jones, the Sale Act, this has been, it looks like, one of the big issues, and Alan Joyce, in his interview in David Spears' interview with him the other day, said that perhaps there needs to be a change in the Sale Act where Virgin is included in that as well. Is that something Labor would consider? We
support, our position is quite clear. We support the Sale Act as it stands. And can I address the issue that you've asked, Dan? I think it a little bit strange that we've got a domestic airline that is in part owned by a foreign government in Australia, yet we would take off the table the Australian government having some equity in Qantas. I mean, you've recently given $8 billion to the Reserve Bank and asked nothing in return. Why not have an equity stake in Qantas and get a return as any other shareholder would? It would be a good investment.
But one of the issues as well, as Alan Joyce saying, it's an unlevel playing field. The issue of foreign investment, well, at the moment, under the Sale Act, Qantas can go up to 49%. They're nowhere near that. So why is this even on the table, Dan?
Well, there are restrictions. So what we need to do is have a look at those restrictions and see whether they are the things which are preventing foreign airlines from coming in and saying, yes, we want to invest in Qantas, or it might be foreign companies that want to come in and invest in Qantas. This is the discussion and debate we need to have. There's a 25% cap on foreign ownership as a part of that 49%. We need to look at that. We need to look at creative ways to get capital into Australia. We can't just sit back and expect the capital to come from within. We've always been a net importer of capital, and we have to look at creative ways to keep bringing that into this country. Otherwise, our industries are going to suffer.
Like knocking off the sale of GrainCorp. That was a pretty creative way of getting foreign investment into the country, saying we're open for business, but not you.
We will get to GrainCorp, but look, the government is seeking bipartisan support today for an agriculture white paper. Is the bipartisanship there?
Well, look, Joel Fitzgibbon, our spokesperson on this, has already said we offer bipartisan support. Our previous spokesperson in this area, when we were in government, of course, published the white paper on food. We think that there is tremendous opportunities, tremendous challenges for Australia in this area, but we can be a provider of food, particularly protein, to the burgeoning middle class of our region. We should ensure we're well placed to do that.
But Dan Tehan, why do we need another white paper? It seems like we've had a lot of white papers in this area. Looking at the Asian Century white paper, this was all included. What do we not know that this white paper is going to produce?
Can I first just say it's terrific that the Labor Party have come on board, and this will be a bipartisan approach, because I think it's very important. I think what we need to see is a bit more vision for agriculture in this nation, and that's what the white paper sets out to do. So I think it'll be a little bit different to the other white papers that we've seen, in that we really want this to set out a clear vision as to where agriculture in this nation can be in 15, in 30 years. And that's what I think Barnaby Joyce is setting out to do. I commend him from doing that, and he's already put some really interesting ideas on the table with regards to that.
But do mum and dad farmers need to be more open to foreign investment?
There's no doubt that the agriculture sector, full stop, needs to be more open to foreign investment. We need capital. That's every report that's been done on the sector shows that. What we have to do, though, is be creative in how we do that. What we have to enable is mum and dad farmers to be able to bring capital into their businesses themselves, and that's one of the things that Barnaby has suggested in what he's had to say today. Is that's one of the things that it will look at, and I really think that that's encouraging.
The farmers in our nation, Stephen Jones, are looking at debt overall of about $60 billion. Is this something that you think the public is comfortable with, more foreign investment in mum and dad farms?
Look, since Australia was settled by white people, we've relied on foreign capital in the agricultural sector and in every other sector. I don't think it helps to advocate that economic reality in public when you've got members of the government going around running their economic xenophobia lines. You know, some foreign investment is good, some foreign investment is bad. Don't invest in this sector, do invest in that.
That's
consistent
right,
message
isn't it?
needs to come across.
There hasn't been a consistent message on this. Barnaby Joyce's resistance to, I think, at least foreign investment in agriculture and farming hasn't always been so strong. So is he on the same page as what you're saying today?
Oh, look, I think so. We've always had scrutiny on foreign investment, whether it be, you know, oil and gas industry, whether it be the Australian Stock Exchange, whether it be key agricultural assets. So I think it's a bit rich to say that, you know, we don't have this type of scrutiny across all sectors. What we do need to realise, though, is that for our agriculture sector to produce for what's going to happen in Asia in the next 10 to 15 years, we need capital to do that. And what we have to do is look at the ways we can do that. Now, I thought Barnaby was very good in saying that maybe we need to get more capital from the city into our agricultural sector. Obviously, there were some decisions taken by the previous Labor government which stopped that. I think we need now to look at whether there needs to be changes in that regard.
So when we look to the free trade agreements, Stephen Jones, China is obviously the next big one. Should the threshold of FIRB be a negotiating point when coming to that free trade agreement? Should that be an area in which the government and Barnaby Joyce should be giving in?
No, look, I don't think so. I think FIRB has served us well. It gives the government, the national government, an opportunity to run a national interest test across foreign investment.
But it is higher for China.
What matters more is that we put in place good bilateral relationship and that there is certainty in investment decisions. And that's why I keep coming back to GrainCorp. You can't put the open for business sign up and say foreign investment, we want you here, and particularly want you here in the the agricultural sector and say, but not on this one because my National Party mates don't like
wrong
it.
or right decision on GrainCorp, but either way you look at it, it has put Australia one step back when it comes to the view the world has of Australia when it comes to foreign investment.
Well, Stephen was just talking about the importance of FIRB, and FIRB was split on that decision. So I think we need to face the facts on it. What I'd look to is the free trade agreement with South Korea.
Open for business, still in flashing lights though?
Well, after the South Korean FTA, yes, absolutely. And we'll get FTAs with Japan and we'll get FTAs with China. So this government
What about that issue of China and negotiating the free trade agreement, whether the FIRB threshold should be a negotiating point or something that Nick Barnaby and Tony Abbott are willing to give on?
Well, the Trade Minister, Andrew Robb, I think did an outstanding job in his negotiations with South Korea. Obviously, he was able to get a carve-out on agriculture when it came to investment, but he was also able to get the limit lifted to over 1,000 million when it came to other industries. So I think you'll see that type of creativity from Andrew Robb again when it comes to Japan and potentially with China.
OK, I quickly just want to ask Stephen Jones about the Ocean Protector. The Japanese whaling fleet has left for the Southern Ocean, but look, whether a customs vessel will go to oversee that, it's not quite clear. The Minister's office says the situation will be monitored. Do we really need a customs vessel on the Southern Ocean at this point?
Well, when we were in government, we said no. We didn't, and we got pilloried for it by Greg Hunt and others. I remember them in Parliament, throwing every bomb they could at us for not sending a boat down there. So this is a clear case of them saying one thing last year before the election and retreating from it at a rate of not.
No, we said we'd supervise. That's what we're going to be doing. It is, and that's what we're going to be doing. Greg Hunt's made that clear.
Not quite sending the Ocean Protector though. Dan Tehan, Stephen Jones, thanks so much for joining us on Lunchtime Agenda today.